The 2024 NBA draft is right around the corner. The Warriors do have one pick, the 52nd pick. However, they have been known to grab some quality players late in the second round, so there's still hope. I spoke with an expert from 247 Sports about what some of the options are, and that's coming up now on Locked On Warriors.
You are Locked On Warriors, your daily Golden State Warriors podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On Warriors your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use the code, all lowercase, LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Thanks so much for being here on today's show. I'm your host, Kylen Mills, a play-by-play broadcaster host for the Big Ten Network, NBC Sports Bay Area, and several other outlets. On today's show, we're going to talk about some NBA draft projections. I spoke with Isaac Trotter, national college basketball writer for 247 Sports and CBS Sports, about what some of the options are, who might still be available for the Warriors when it comes to the 52nd pick. I also have some other possible picks beyond that and a couple that we talked about that I will present to you. And then also just looking back at the history of the Warriors drafts. Who are some of the steals they've walked away with from late in the second round or just later picks overall that have ended up becoming really good NBA players? We'll break all of that down right now on the show. But first, I want to go back to my conversation with Isaac. He joined me just a couple days ago. We recorded this talking about some of the different options the Warriors could look at drafting, who might still be available, how he thinks those pieces might fit into the Warriors system, and who some sleepers are that he thinks could be really quality players still available later on when it comes to the 52nd pick. So without further ado, here's the conversation with Isaac Trotter. All right, we're excited to be joined here on Locked On Warriors by Isaac Trotter, who is a national college basketball writer for 247 Sports and CBS Sports. Isaac, thanks so much for stopping by and sharing some of your insight, a fellow Chicago person. Glad to have you on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, well, let's dive right into this year's draft class. You cover college basketball. You have for several years. Going back to 2023, it's hard to top that when you have Victor Wembanyama coming in, and then you also have prospects like Scoot Henderson, who were so touted and just, so highly looked to. And now I feel like this year it's a little bit of a downer. And right away after 2023, people were kind of making the conjections that 2024 was going to be a little bit of a weaker class. But from what you've seen and the way college basketball developed during this last school year, how would you assess this year's class overall and some of the strengths and weaknesses?
Well, there's no doubt that it's a down class that everyone's going to say. I think that there is maybe a little bit of a misnomer where even in down classes, you can find really good players. And so I think back to that Anthony Edwards draft, right? When the Warriors took James Wiseman, like there were really good players in that draft, right? Like not to
we don't talk about 2021. We don't talk about it, okay? But yes.
Right. That was called a bad draft. Like this one is also called a bad draft as well. I understand that, but there are some good talents in it. And I think if you're looking at just from like positions of need, there's some really interesting big men that are pretty cheap. I think in this draft cycle, whether that's middle of the first, late first, early second, mid second, like I look at guys like Kyle Filipowski, Deron Holmes, Adem Bona. Like there's a lot of like those interesting names of like big men who, as we've seen in the NBA, skilled size is everything. So if I'm, a team that needs a big man that can come into my rotation and potentially be ready to rock and roll right away, like this isn't necessarily a bad draft for that because there's a lot of different options.
Yeah, 100%. And a big man might be someone the Warriors might be interested in, especially given some of their size deficiencies. They did bring in Trace Jackson-Davis last year, a pretty developed and older big out of Indiana. I like the way his game is translated. He's shown the ability to be a vertical threat, has been a lot of fun to watch through his rookie year, had some pretty good success. Still developing him, but they certainly could use some help additionally with size. Okay, well, let's look at a couple of prospects I want to ask you about specifically who have been put around some of the latest projections. Once again, the Warriors have the 52nd overall pick, so they're going pretty late in the second round. Bleacher Report's latest projection has Akron forward Enrique Freeman as the pick. Do you have any insight on his game and what he might bring should he end up being around when the Warriors are making that selection?
Well, first off, he's a great story. Like he is a guy who he was a walk-on at Akron, like a legit walk-on, like randomly showed up to the camp and found a way onto the team and has turned into an awesome player. So I'm at the NBA Combine, right? And John Gross, who is the coach at Akron, has kind of a raspy voice. He's telling everybody within scouting, like any scout that he can find about this story and about this kid. And like the gym was pretty quiet. Like there's not a lot going on. Like you could hear John Gross's voice literally echoing throughout all of Wintrust Arena in Chicago. So he is a really, really good kid. I think that he would be a no doubt culture fit too, but then the game as well too. He's 6'7". He's an awesome rebounder. Like I think some of that stuff absolutely plays, just the ability to play hard and the ability to be active on the glass. And then you think about him as a secondary rim protector too. Like, yes, he's 6'7", but he's got a plus wingspan. Like you see his ability to go up and be an adequate shot blocker. Like I think there's some questions about him as like a shooter, and you're still kind of seeing if that part of his game can progress. But even in the NCAA tournament, he had some moments against Ryan Kalkbrenner and that Creighton team where he was able to stretch the floor against them and give them some trouble, especially with his ability like to attack long closeouts because he's really fluid with his handle. So I like Enrique Freeman. I honestly would be surprised if he's there at 52 because kind of the vibes in Chicago when we were around the Combine is that he was a big-time riser. A lot of people seem to really like him, and he's just got a great story. He's somebody you easily want to root for, and the cooler and the longer that story goes, you know, it's going to be a really, really cool path to follow because you can really – I mean, you can make it to the NBA doing anything, even being a walk-on. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. You always love to hear those stories. Marty Strus is one of my favorite, Max Strus. So I played with Marty Strus at Lewis University in the Chicago area, and I loved the D2 to being like a key piece of the NBA Heat star. And you love even more a walk-on story is amazing. One question to follow up on Freeman, though, you do get questions sometimes about players who come from these mid-majors. Like realistically, is what they're doing at that level going to translate when you make such a big jump to the NBA? You're going up against guys who are so much bigger, stronger. Generally, athletically, you see that little edge at the power conference schools compared to some of those mid-major schools. When you watch them play, do you have any concerns with that? Or what do you take, I guess, on the whole conversation around the players who are coming from mid-majors?
No, it's a really fair point. And I think it's something that other teams are going to have to get used to because there's a lot of really good players coming from the mid-major ranks, even like a Dalton Connect this year, who's going to be a potential lottery pick transferring to Tennessee from Northern Colorado. I think of Enrique Freeman. You know, if he hit the portal last year, he'd have been one of the most highly sought after players in the transfer portal. So his ability to stay, Akron's ability to keep him wanting to stay there, I think is actually a positive, not necessarily a negative. There's no doubt he's a high major basketball player that was just playing at Akron. So I think that it's an opportunity for him to head into the next level. I'm not super concerned about it. Just also the other thing too, like I like that his ability to scale down his role because he had to play with as a pretty big role at Akron. Like, and I like to bet on those guys to scale down to become role players. Like we've seen a lot of those superstars at the college ranks they're a lot better at scaling down and becoming those role players, accepting low usage roles, accepting doing the dirty work, accepting just finding a way to impact winning. That's like the type of prototype that you're trying to look for with Freeman. And I wouldn't be shocked at all if he's someone who sticks in the league a lot longer than a lot of people would have expected a couple of years ago.
The midsummer months can be a little bit of a slower time for sports fans. Once the NBA finals end, you can watch the WNBA and also MLB in action. And one way to make those games even more fun is by putting some cash on it and playing Prize Picks. With Prize Picks, you can turn $10 into $1,000 in a single game watching your favorite sports. You can make a Prize Picks lineup in as little as 1 minute. You just need to pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and that's it. You're locked in. I'll give you an example from a WNBA game. Angel Reese in the Chicago Sky taking on Washington. Reese, more or less 13.5 points is one pick you can make. And then Reese, more or less 10 rebounds, another pick. I'm going with more for both of those on her. She's coming off a career high double-double, and it really seems to be coming into her own in her rookie season. But you can bet on whatever you're interested in and turn $10 into $1,000. Prize Picks also offers injury insurance. So if your lineup stays in play, even if one of your players gets hurt, if someone goes out in the first half also, and they don't play in the second, that won't count as a loss, which is great. Prize Picks is America's #1 fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. Get in on the daily action with your friends and become part of the Prize Picks community today. Download the app today and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It is that easy. One other player specifically I want to ask you about is someone that you mentioned already, one of the bigs coming out of UCLA, Adem Bona. I like his game. You talk about athleticism, ability to be a rim runner. You mentioned some buzzwords as well about just being good interior defenders. What stands out about him when you watch him play and what you've seen throughout the season?
Well, he's super toolsy. And I think if you're betting on Bona, you're betting on like the athleticism being like legit. Like you see like some of the vertical ability to get above the floor and put like that finger on the square, like above the backboard. Like he's
Ridiculous.
nasty. Yeah, he's got some nasty athletic pop to him, but I think he's pretty raw still, just kind of how I evaluate it, which could potentially give him a chance to be a jewel if you're at 52 and someone that you're potentially seeing what he can be in a couple of years. You know, I have questions about his hands. I have questions about his ability to defend without fouling. There's been some questions about him, like, can he pass? Can he make plays off the short roll? Like, you remember, like, just how elite Draymond is at that short roll and playing 4-on-3 basketball.
Exactly,
if you're going to use Bona in that type of role, like I think you still have questions about him being able to decipher a defense in like 0.5 seconds and get the ball to Steph and figure out the way to do their handoff game. Like it's a real question. Now, I think he wouldn't necessarily have to do that right away. Like you could give him time to do that. You could put him in the dunker spot and be, you know, hey, what's your job? Like run the floor, dunk the basketball, play good pick and roll defense, and block shots. Like you can simplify that game for him. The other underrated part about him is he is a great dude and a great competitor. Like you're not going to hear anything bad about him throughout the pre-draft process. He loves basketball. I think he wants to embrace any role that he has. And there's been some guys that in the pre-draft process that he's gone up against, and he's just cooked them in individual workouts throughout this pre-draft process. And they're ranked higher than him. And they have like maybe more physical, like, tools, or maybe they're a little bit more skilled than he is, but he just plays so hard and like everything, like he's so competitive. So he's just an interesting guy to me, because I think even last year in that draft, if he had stayed in the draft, there are people that really liked him. I know the Kings really liked him last year coming out, and I wonder, you know, what type of progress he's made, because I wouldn't say his film from this past season like elevated his stock to some crazy high level, but people are looking at him going like, we know what you could be in a couple of years. And he's going to be a really interesting piece moving forward. And also the background too, former 5-star guy too. So it's a good bet on like the background of coming up, like the physical tools of this kid was seen, you know, well before, you know, just the last couple of years. Like people have been high on him for a few years, and Bona fits the bill as a pretty interesting sleeper in that second round if he's still there at 52.
All right. You mentioned the word I was about to bring up, and that's sleeper. I know I mentioned 2 specific names, but you've gotten a look at a wide array of players as the season has gone on. When you look at some of these later second round picks, who's 1 or 2 guys that you can see still being available that maybe are sleepers or that could potentially go on to have strong NBA careers despite not being those highly coveted guys at this point?
I love Jalen Wells out of Washington State. I think he is awesome. He checks off so many boxes for me. And then again, like the cool story with him too is just a Division II guy. He's playing like Sonoma State 13 months ago, transfers to Washington State, has a phenomenal year. He's really grown into his body, one of those late bloomers types. And you just think of what the Warriors run and like his ability at 6'8" to make off movement threes. He comes off screen. He doesn't need much room to catch and fire. Like he plays hard. He's going to be a 3-and-D potential weapon. Like I still am a little bit hesitant to see what he'll be as a defender yet, but I know the jumper is real. And I think in this time of basketball, teams, and more than ever, like if they have a question about like 2 different prospects on the board, they're going to take the guy that can make shots. And I know Jalen Wells can make shots, and like shooting is of such a high priority right now throughout like the roster building, both in the NBA and in college. And Wells is a stud. Like if he's there at 52, like that would make a ton of sense. Also, he gets to stay out west. That'd be pretty cool as well. So he was one of my favorite guys like last year in the transfer portal cycle. I do a lot of work covering the portal cycle. And so it's no surprise like for me that I really like him too in this cycle too. And he seems to have, you know, a lot of people that liked him. He went through that pre-draft process. He could have gone back to school, hit the portal again. And, you know, hitting the portal right now, like you could make a ton of money. Guys in college are making a ton of money. We've seen a lot of those stay or go decisions tend to slip toward the college ranks because you didn't necessarily have like a guaranteed pick in the NBA draft. Wells chose to stay in the draft. And that makes me think a lot of people really like him too.
Very interesting. I love it. All great takes. All you have to say is he's a great shooter. The Warriors love floor spacers, 3-and-D, even better. They desperately need help defensively. So sold. No other questions asked from my end, but it's always hard to predict when you get to like the 52nd pick, like who's really going to be available? Who knows what other teams are looking at? But that's why we watch. That's why we love to do it. Isaac, thank you so much for hanging. Appreciate it. Where's the best place that people can follow you and look up your content?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at Isaac_Trotter. Someone stole my first underscore. We're still not cool about it. And then I know. Yeah. And then 247sports.com or cbssports.com too. You can see my stuff there too. So it's all basketball all the time. So it's definitely a good time for college basketball fans. And then obviously the NBA draft right around the corner too is awesome.
Perfect. All right. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Great hearing from Isaac Trotter there. To continue our NBA draft discussions, I want to recap really quickly how the Warriors got to this point. Have seen some people asking, what happened to the first round pick? Quick reminder, back in 2019, the Warriors traded the 2024 first-round pick, top 4 protected, to the Memphis Grizzlies, along with Andre Iguodala. Back in 2023, the Grizzlies traded that first-round pick to the Boston Celtics in a 3-team trade. Then the Boston Celtics traded the Warriors' 2024 first-round pick to the Portland Trail Blazers. Now, top 4 protected means if based on the NBA draft lottery, the Warriors' pick had come in 1, 2, 3, or 4, they would have been able to keep it. If the pick was anything outside of the top 4, that means it does then belong to the opposing team the Warriors had made the trade with. Back in May, the NBA draft lottery was held. The Warriors pick came up at 14th, so that meant it officially went to the Portland Trail Blazers, who will be making that selection. That leaves the Warriors with 1 pick, 52nd overall, late second round. However, I hope you took away from the conversation with Isaac that all hope is not lost. It is still very popular, or possible, I should say, to bring in a player who can have a great NBA career. A couple interesting names were brought up by Isaac. I thought Jalen Wells was one, but I need to bring up another, and that's Kentucky shooting guard Antonio Reeves. Could be someone the Warriors look to draft at 52nd overall. Reeves, 6'6", 195, the best, or at least one of the best, spot-up shooters and shot makers in this class. Should still be available around that time. Now, his game is best, or his shooting game is best when it's the catch and shoot looks. He can pull up, he can hit the floater, but those necessarily aren't his main strengths, but he can do those things when he's in rhythm with the offense and when he's in a good flow. Want to pull up Antonio Reeves' stats really, really fast. As of late March of this past year, I couldn't find whether or not this was still true after the NCAA tournament, but prior to that, Reeves shooting nearly 51% from the field, more than 44% from three-point land, nearly 87% from the free throw line, all career bests, was the only Power 5 player averaging at least 1.5 made three-pointers a game and shooting at least 49% from the field, at least 43.5% from three, and at least 86.5% from the charity stripe, which is incredible. So you're looking at someone who could possibly come in and be a shot maker and make an impact right away for this Warriors team that is lacking in three-point shooting, which isn't something that you typically say, at least not during the last 12 years about this Warriors team. But outside of Steph Curry, Klay Thompson still has the ability, but he's inconsistent from beyond the arc. There's nights where he goes off. There's nights where he's totally cold. Andrew Wiggins, inconsistent this past season. If you're looking for a 3-and-D player like the Warriors are hoping he would be, definitely struggled with a three-point shot this last season, at times pretty badly. There wasn't really anyone coming in off the bench who was a strong three-point shooter going back to the 2022 title run. At times, Otto Porter Jr. was able to come in and hit some big threes. So there is a possibility in my eyes that if Reeves can come in and hit shots and continue that type of shooting from beyond the arc that he had success at in college, there should be room for him to get minutes and to find some chances in this rotation, because they could use someone who can come in and hit the three ball and space the floor and help draw attention away from Steph Curry if he were to somehow end up in rotation where they were both on the floor at the same time. Like, it's never a bad thing for this Warriors offense to have multiple shooters on the floor at once. And you bring in one of the best spot-up shooters in the class. I don't think that's a bad idea for a young player. One of the issues is that Reeves is not known for his defense. And Steve Kerr definitely likes his youngsters to play defense. It's something he said throughout the last couple of years. If you come in and you play defense, I'll find a way to get you minutes. Granted, the Warriors defense as a team has not been good the last 2 seasons. In 2022, when they won the title, the Warriors are the second most efficient defense in the NBA, Hasn't necessarily been that way the last 2 seasons, but Steve Kerr does like to look for defense from the young guys. And if you play well, he'll put you on the floor. Will be interesting to see. I don't know necessarily that Reeves is going to be a liability, but all of his defensive statistics and ratings from the collegiate level are not necessarily strong. So something to keep an eye on, but I do think Reeves would be a good option if the Warriors are looking at trying to bring in a quality player who could possibly impact the rotation or at least work his way into some minutes early on in his career. So there you have it in terms of the Warriors' possible draft picks. We'll continue to have that discussion as the weeks roll on and we get closer to the 2024 NBA draft. In talking to some of my friends who are local business owners, especially since the pandemic, they say it's so hard to find the right candidates and to hire people they're looking for to fill their jobs. If you are a small business who's looking to hire, one great tool can be LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn is a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. It gives you access to professionals you can't find anywhere else. LinkedIn does all of that while making the process easy and intuitive. Hiring is easy when you have that many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Also, it makes it much easier to go through those candidates and to find the right people when you don't necessarily have the time or resources to hire, as so many small business owners are wearing so many hats. LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make the process easier. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, so it's even quicker. 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnba. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnba to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Okay, moving on from the possible players the Warriors could be looking at in the 2024 NBA draft, I want to take some positives away from past draft classes that can give us some hope, as the Warriors do just have this 152nd overall pick. Looking back at some of their second-round picks, which players and what players went on to have great NBA careers or do have a lot of promise in their NBA careers. Let's start with Trayce Jackson-Davis. Keep in mind, he was the 57th overall pick in the 2023 draft. He already made an impact, in my opinion, in his rookie season, averaging more than 8 points per game. And you saw him earn a starting role on and off throughout the season. I love what he brought to the table. He was a shot blocker. He provided a strong interior presence, more of a traditional big, can bang inside. You saw he was a lob threat offensively for the Warriors. I like what he brought to the table. I think he was more polished than what you see from some of the other young players who come in after just 1 year, because he did play at the University of Indiana, played a full career there. And I do think that paid off and paid dividends. Lob threat, rim protector, first Warriors rookie with 100 dunks in a season. So at least since that's been tracked, dating back to, I believe it was the 1990s, that's pretty cool. So he's still very early on in his NBA career, but I will say, getting a 57th overall pick to have that type of rookie production and just be a contributor bodes very well for him moving forward. And so far, I'm going to assess that pick as a win for the Warriors. Moving on, Draymond Green, let's not forget, was a 35th overall pick in the 2012 draft. Forward coming out of Michigan State University, had really good numbers, but wasn't one of those highly coveted players, wasn't in the first round, became a consistent starter by his third season, was an all-star NBA champion in year 4, made a huge leap, has been with the Warriors throughout the entirety of his career, 4 all-star appearances, has been an all-NBA player, won all the championships, as we know. The 2017 NBA Defensive Player of the Year, has been on a multitude of all defensive teams. And by the way, apparently is now a three-point shooter because he shot more than 39% from beyond the arc this past season. Who would have thought? But ended up becoming a key cog for the Warriors, their defensive team captain, a huge leader when it comes to being that floor general that can tell the young players where to go. He sees things ahead of time. Like the cerebralness of his game is incredible, especially when you look at the way he's able to make defensive reads ahead of time and anticipate and then tell people where to go. Like he's always in the right place at the right time. So he's a step ahead. And again, this is a 35th overall pick who's gone on to have an incredible career that is still going. All right, Monte Ellis was a 40th overall pick all the way back in the 2005 draft. Guard who was picked straight out of Lanier High School in Jackson, Mississippi. So straight out of high school. was named the NBA's most improved defensive player in his sophomore campaign, which was back in 2007, increased his scoring average by nearly 10 points from 6.8 points per game to 16.5 points per game. His field goal percentage went up about 6%. Basically, all of his numbers went through the roof, played 6.5 years with the Warriors before being traded away, but had a great career. The best scoring year of his career was 2009-10. He averaged 25.5 points per game. But I'm sure you're all familiar with Monte Ellis, once again, a 40th overall pick who went on to have a very impressive career. Gilbert Arenas, 31st overall pick in the 2001 draft. Guard out of the University of Arizona, was drafted with the first pick of the second round, obviously being the 31st pick, back in 2001, that is. Won NBA's Most Improved Player Award in his second and final season with the Warriors, so wasn't there long. Went from averaging about 11 points per game to more than 18 points per game, rebounding in that Most Improved season, 4.7 boards, 6.3 assists, went on to sign a max contract with the Wizards. Unfortunately, at the time, the Warriors couldn't match that deal. They couldn't keep him. But you're looking at someone who was named to 3 All-Star rosters, was an All-NBA guy throughout his career with the Wizards, and once again, was a second-round pick. So there still is very much hope for the Golden State Warriors to pick up someone who is going to be a great addition to this roster. Final thought for me, or final note I want to make, is that Klay Thompson has unfollowed the Golden State Warriors on Twitter. It's been reported across social media that he also removed several photos. I didn't personally see those photos, like check his timeline before all this was reported, but there's screen grabs showing photos of him even celebrating the championship, or a couple of him, was it just one or a couple of him with the Warriors that have since been deleted. So basically he deleted a couple photos relating him to the Warriors. He unfollowed the team. And a lot of people are reading into that as to how the conversations are going surrounding Klay Thompson possibly returning and being re-signed to the Warriors. So I'm going to say that's not a good sign. I don't think that you unfollow the team if negotiations are going well. That's for sure. I am going to read into that and say I think that chances are increasing by the day that Klay Thompson is going to move on in free agency. Officially opens June 26th, but conversations are going on behind the scenes. Klay Thompson unfollowing the Golden State Warriors on Instagram. You definitely don't do that if things are going well. So we'll just say that. It's giving ex-boyfriend, ex-girlfriend. Unfollow, send the message, delete the photos. I definitely don't think, and maybe some people have suggested, maybe you're overthinking it. Maybe this is just some type of negotiation tactic. It's possible. But I definitely don't think if negotiations are going well that you're doing all of that. So that's my 2 cents. Last thing for me, call to action here for all of you who are watching or listening. Appreciate you hanging along for the ride here on Locked On Warriors. Next week, I'm going to be doing an episode for all of you Seinfeld fans called The Airing of the Grievances. And I want to go through whatever your list of biggest grievances are or is with the Golden State Warriors. I'd love for you to drop a comment. If you're on YouTube, drop a comment. Let me know, what is your biggest grievance with the Warriors right now? I'm going to read some of them and address them in an entire episode. I've got a couple guests planned, so I'm not sure exactly who's going to be on that specific episode next week, but we're going to talk about it. I've been surprised. A lot of the comments as we're talking about the Warriors trying to retool for next season, talking about what pieces could be brought in. A lot of people are complaining about Steve Kerr. Their biggest grievance is Steve Kerr not doing XYZ. If that's what you have the biggest issue with, let me know. Drop a comment, because there's a possibility it will get read, and we're definitely going to be doing some discussions about your biggest issues with the Warriors right now on an episode. And then you know what? We're going to flush it, because I want to try to keep the show real, but as positive as possible. Like, no one wants to just listen to a show and just be brought down and be depressed about the team that they follow and love at the end of the day. So we're going to try to keep it real, be realistic, but just one episode. I mean, you want an episode to air the grievances. That's what the day is all about. Festivus for the rest of us. And then we're going to move on and try to focus on what the team can do this offseason and really ramping up on some of the different storylines to follow as free agency opens, as trades start to blow up here, and then the NBA draft grows closer. So that'll do it for this episode of Locked On Warriors. Appreciate you all joining us. Really glad to have you and hope you'll continue to follow along. Now, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. Have a great day. Have a great night. Thanks again for joining us from wherever you are, and we will see you next time.